music to the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Paul and Kelly get caught in the lake. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor propose the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity when they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Steam Fun Kelly with the sand clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts flow.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Punch Show. Today, I really just didn't even want to do this. I'm just not feeling that up to it right now because, frankly, I'm just kind of depressed about the whole government shutdown and the way the media's been covering it. But then I started to realize, you know what? I'm not going to let them win. I'm not going to just shut down because the government did. So anyway, I think I'll just dive right in. The way the media has covered this is, like kind of a two sides thing. Whose fault is it? That's the way they always cover shutdowns. Whose fault is it? And then, who will the public blame? And it's more of a sportscasting than newscasting type situation. What I'd really love to see is for the media to talk about why both parties are letting the government shut down. And, the Republicans are trying to, frame this as the Democrats are letting it shut down because the Democrats voted against the bill that the Republicans wanted. Not that the Republicans weren't willing to negotiate with the Democrats to give the Democrats a bill they could vote for. They say it's a clean bill. It's not clean. It's filthy. And it's filthy because of what it lacks. Like basically what it comes down to are three things. And I'll just articulate each of these. One, the Democrats want the Medicaid cuts repealed. Number two, the Democrats want the ACA or the Affordable Care Act or what they call Obamacare defunded. Or the Republicans want it defunded. The Democrats want it funded. And number three, the Democrats want to include something in it that says that the president of the United States can't just take the budget as a suggestion, which is what he seems to think it is. And according to the Constitution and the power of the purse, that's the case. According to the right-wing nutjob-owned Supreme Court, now the budget can just be slashed. The president can just decide not to spend money that's allocated to spend in certain things. So when President Ocasio-Cortez decides to just not fund ICE, regardless of what the budget says, the Republicans made that bet and they can lie in it. But right now they're just lying on TV. Mike Johnson was like everywhere the last couple of days, spreading this just outright lie that the whole shutdown is because the Democrats want to give, and I use this word, which I find offensive to the uttermost, only because it is the word that they use, illegals. That they want to give them, that Democrats want to give them like just free health care or whatever. I would just like to point out that regardless of where you stand on how much healthcare undocumented workers get. And I think that, the reality is that they get emergency care and only enough to sustain them because that's required by law. Some of them pay their bills, some of them can't. But that is already in the big beautiful bill. The reimbursement of hospitals for that care is already in the bill that the Republicans unanimously voted for. Like, that is not the issue right now. That is not something the Democrats are fighting for, and nor is it something that the Republicans are fighting against. Every single Republican already voted to fund hospital reimbursement for emergency care for undocumented workers, which is the only kind of care they get, funded by the government. They can and do often have their own insurance. So, and just like every human being, they deserve life-saving care and, or emergency health care. That doesn't mean emergency headache. That means they're having a heart attack and they either die or they live. I think they have to be brought to a stable condition, if I remember this correctly. All right. So that's what the argument is not about. It is not about undocumented workers. What it is about is restoring Medicaid to the, as many as 12 million people who were just cut off it, and tens of millions of more Americans who are currently at least partly funded by the Affordable Care Act. And the fact that the president shouldn't just be able to, change what spending is done, because then what's the point of even having a budget? If the president can just use it as a suggestion, what's even the point? He is a dictator at that point. He just decides how much. We might as well even not have a Congress or a Supreme Court at this point. If he's just going to ignore both, he is a dictator. So stop telling me to stop saying he's a fascist. He is a fascist. He acts like a fascist. If he walks like a fascist, talks like a fascist, and farts like a fascist, and poops his pants like a fascist, he's a fascist. Donald Trump is a fascist. Fascist. Look it up. All right. But having said all that, I had a conversation with Grok this morning. I know some of you don't like AI, but it's good for like doing research. As long as you don't like just just take Grok's word for everything. Sometimes you have to challenge it and probe it a little bit. But I wanted to know. I had this MAGA tell me on Twitter yesterday, what do I care if the AC is unfunded or Medicaid is unfunded? I don't have either of those. It's not going to affect me. And this is where I think we need to especially, I wish the Democrats would do a much better job of articulating this. You don't need to be on the ACA or Medicaid in order for it to affect you, number one. Number two, it shouldn't have to affect you for you to be a decent human being and realize that tens of millions of Americans, not immigrants, not undocumented immigrants, but actual Americans born and raised, are going to lose their health care as a result of this clean spending bill that's about as clean as Pigpen. So how is that? Why is that? Okay, so I went, how many? So I asked Grok about this, and by 2026, if there were a full ACA repeal which eliminated all the subsidies, expansion, and mandates which currently exist, which is what will happen if it is not funded. An estimated 32 million Americans will lose their health insurance by 2026. If it's only partially defunded, it'll only be 18 to 27 million, rising to 32 million. Just the Medicaid expansion defunding would cause 15 to 20 million people to lose their insurance. If you just let the premium tax credits expire, that's about another 4 million annually. So by so over 8 years, 32 million. And Republican mega bill cuts, another 15 to 16 million. So we are talking conservatively, at least 30 million, maybe 40 million people losing their health insurance. And this might seem like a bit of an aside, and it is, but it's something really interesting that I had never thought of. But did you know that children, and I don't mean just children, I mean like kids, anybody like 0 to 18, don't read anymore. They don't read fiction anymore. And like it used to be like 70 or 80% of kids would just read for fun growing up. Now it's down to like less than 10%. And I was just reading, a Facebook post on this recently by a friend of mine, and my brother commented that this actually might be why there's this empathy gap now. And it took me a I had to think about that for a second. But when you read a fiction book, when you read a really good fiction book, you enter that person's world. You feel what they feel, you think what they think. If you ever read a good Stephen King book, you were a gunslinger. If you ever read the Tolkien series, you were a hobbit. Like, you enter that person's fictional reality, if you know what I mean. Like, that's where we learn empathy. That's where we learn to feel how other people feel is by engaging in fictional literature. And so I think it's interesting that, especially with the MAGAs that, are against so much really good fictional literature, also complain about empathy. And it's not something I had ever considered before, but I think it's really fascinating if you think about it. They do not have the ability to empathize because they never read a book. I mean, like, I'm not saying that sarcastically, I'm saying that literally. And I just find that like really fascinating. So when they say, oh, well, this doesn't affect me, it indicates a lack of not just empathy, but curiosity and literacy. So, but anyway, setting that aside, we'll go back to the original point, which is that, yes, people are going to lose their insurance. And so what about people that say, oh, well, it won't matter to me because I have employer insurance or I have private insurance. So, my insurance won't be affected. Don't be so quick to think that. No matter what, if you take 40 million Americans off their health insurance, you will be affected. I don't care if you have the best healthcare there is. I don't care how premium Cadillac plan you have. You will be affected. All right. And I'm going to tell you how. First of all, so just need to scroll down here. So I had this conversation with Grok about like, okay, so if this were to happen, what would happen to the cost of insurance, of private insurance? If I can just, okay, estimated premium increases. Premiums for private insurance. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me, got to share my screen here. Kelly, get with the program, dude. Okay, so here we go. All right. Estimated premium increases. Premiums for private insurance, primarily individual market plans, and to a lesser degree, small group and employer sponsored plans, would increase by 50 to 100% on average by 2034, with some markets seeing hikes up to 150%. Now, get ready to just like go, what the actual fornication? For a typical family of four in the individual market, this could raise annual premiums from 22,600, the current baseline, to 33,900 to $45,000, $45,200 or higher. All right. You think you're paying too much right now? You think that the magical solution is getting rid of the ACA? You think the ACA costs you too much? Then you have no idea how expensive it can get. Do you have, how many people even, like almost half of America doesn't even make $45,000. So do you have enough money to spend $45,000 a year on health insurance? Because that's what the Republicans are fighting for right now. And that's what the Democrats are fighting against. It is really that simple. Yes, right now you have premium insurance. Right now you have private insurance, and you don't need to know what's going on with the ACA or Medicaid because, you've got this great insurance yourself. But what about when prices double? Do you have a kid that has a pre-existing condition? And let me tell you about pre-existing conditions, because these are something the ACA did away with. But you think a pre-existing condition means something like drastic or dramatic, right? I had a period in my life when I was in my early 30s when, for no apparent reason, I just started having some issues with depression. And for 3 months, I was on some antidepressants. And then, for whatever reason, things got better and I didn't need it anymore. But my health insurance doubled. And I mean, just for me as an individual in my 30s, back in the 90s, actually, I think it was around the early 2000s, I was paying $540 a month for my own insurance, and that was the cheapest I could find. $540 a month. And it was going up about 25% every year. It was like massive increase every year. And because I was on antidepressants for 3 months, that was my pre-existing condition. I was a suicide risk. So once we go back to insurance companies can gouge you if you're a pre-existing condition and you're high risk, which is insane, right? Like, if you're like, what does high risk mean? It means that you have a health condition that needs to be taken care of. So you have to like spend even more money to get health care, which makes it harder for people to spend, which is stupid. It's a stupid system. We have a stupid system. And then Obama was at least able to get rid of the pre-existing conditions. And that is a feature that the Republicans want to restore. They want insurance companies to gouge you because you got sad for a couple of months, or because you had a uh high blood pressure, or because you have diabetes. And it's like insane to consider this. And if you're like in your 20s, you've never known this. You don't know what it was like when you were 21, 22 years old and your parents couldn't put you on their insurance and you didn't have enough money to pay for it. So you just lived your life hoping nothing bad happened to you. When I was 25, I didn't have insurance, but I had appendicitis and I had a massive hospital bill that went with it that I couldn't pay. Fortunately, I was living in Minnesota. And so, and I went to St. Mary's, which was part of the Mayo Clinic, and they just forgave my debt, which was, not something everybody can deal with. But I was working, but my job didn't offer insurance. And so I just hoped nothing bad would happen, and something bad happened. That happens to people. All right. So let's say, some people would be going, well, I have employer-based insurance. It won't affect me. But you know what? It'll affect you anyway, even if you have employer-based insurance. All right. Well, actually, before I go on to that, let me explain something. This is why private insurance, I'm just going to shut this. Why does private insurance go up if the ACA and Medicaid are cut? All right. There's a reason for that. And that's people still get emergency health care. There are still laws on the books, and laws which should be there that say if somebody needs emergency medical care, you can't turn them away. And I don't mean emergency medical care in the sense that, oh, I have a bad headache, I need some Tylenol. No, I mean emergency medical care like I've been shot, or I'm having a heart attack, or I have appendicitis. Things like life-saving, or what's the word? Like limb saving, uh like actual extreme emergencies. The emergency rooms have to take care of them, right? And usually if people don't have health insurance, it's because either they don't have jobs or they don't have enough income to pay for it. Or they're these dumb MAGAs that have medical savings accounts that I think are just as good, or they have really, really crappy insurance that doesn't cover anything. All right. So, what happens when those bills don't get paid? Well, a lot of hospitals are already running at a loss, so they can't just, not, just write them off. They still need to cover the cost somehow, right? So, how do hospitals get almost all of their money is through insurance companies. So, what they do is charge the insurance companies more. Then do you think the insurance companies just eat the loss? Do you think they're just like, oh, well, that's the breaks? No. They raise your insurance premiums. And you're like, oh, well, that's okay. I'm in this guarantee, my insurance is locked in and they can't raise the rates and whatever. Look at your insurance contract. Almost every insurance contract is maybe good for 4 or 5 years. If that's like the long time. And then what they do is they change the name of the package every so often. So then it's not that your insurance got canceled, it's that this policy type was ended. These are your new options. And so then, and this was what happened with the whole, Obama saying you can't lose your insurance provider thing. It's not so much that they lost their insurance because the ACA didn't cover or whatever kind of nonsense. It's people just changed what they called their packages. Right. So then you end up paying more. You know who pays for all the emergency room healthcare? All the people with private insurance and all the people with employer-based insurance. The insurance companies pay for that. And so if somebody is on the Affordable Care Act or the or Medicaid or whatever, the government pays those bills. Or the insurance company pays those bills, but the government helps pay for your insurance, depending on whether it's Medicaid or ACA. Or sometimes maybe if you're on the ACA, you pay part of it and the government pays the rest of your insurance, and you pay the um, deductible. So that money is paid by the individual and the government or the insurance company that the individual has versus your insurance company paying for all of it. All right. So what that does is it means that your insurance company charges you more money, which means your premium goes up. That's why premiums, you take 40 million people off of health insurance, and I think it was around $40 billion a year that gets added, or that, like what are they, 40 billion a year on unfunded medical care, for 40 billion more in unfunded medical care. So that means all that insurance goes up. Your private insurance that you're so happy about goes up. Are you ready to pay $45,000 a year for your insurance premium? And that's average. That's not like that's the average insurance. That's not like your premium Cadillac insurance. Some people might be, I'm already paying that. Well, if you're already paying for that, then get ready to pay 90,000 because it's going up like 100% by 2034. But that's all right. Donald Trump has a plan, that's going to come out in 2 weeks. Okay. So, let's say you're like, "All right, I'm fine with that. I have employer-based insurance. It's not going to affect me at all." All right. First of all, let's address that argument. Um let's say your employer pays your insurance and then like they pay 80%, you pay 20%. That means that 20% that you're paying right now, that whatever that is, that number is going to double. But it's not just that. It's also your employer is not just going to eat that cost, depending on how big or how small they are. First of all, if you do not have a large employer that can absorb a tremendous cost increase like that, I mean, because if it's costing you an extra $20,000 a year, it's costing them an extra $20,000 a year. So that means potential layoffs. That means your copay is going to go up. And that also means your pay raises aren't going to be coming. And your bonuses aren't going to be coming. So you're going to be making a whole lot less money than you thought you were going to be making. And you may lose your job, or your employer may just have to drop insurance altogether because they can now and because it's not affordable. Like for them to cover you may mean that they're going to go bankrupt. If they, like you think about it. Let's say you have 10 employees, right? And you make $150,000 a year after everything. And then each of those employees, their insurance goes up $10,000 a year. What's 150,000 minus 200,000? It's negative 50,000. And I don't know how many people are going to be able to pay their bills off a negative $50,000 a year. So they're going to drop their insurance. So you might be saying right now, "Oh, I'm okay. I have health insurance through my employer." Well, what happens if you lose it? Do you have an extra 45 grand a year to sit around, just sitting around? I don't. Most people don't. And those that do you have 90 grand? Because you've probably already got really good insurance, but that's going to go up too. All right. So you say, that's all right. I make $1 million a year. It's not going to affect me. Well, what if I told you it's still going to affect you? And you're going to say, oh, well, how is it going to affect me? I'm ultra rich millionaire dude. Well, hundreds of hospitals across the country, especially in rural areas, are going to be forced to shut down. You cannot, like, so many rural hospitals right now are already running at a loss. And the more red state you are, the more likely it is there's going to be more shutdowns. I think the most shutdowns are going to come in the state of Texas, where I live. So let's say you have this super duper awesome insurance. You can pay unlimited amounts of money for insurance. Money is no object. But you have a heart attack, or your wife has a heart attack, or your son or your daughter has a potentially mortal wound. And you call the ambulance, and the ambulance comes, and they're rushing you to the hospital, and the nearest hospital is 50 miles away because all the other ones closed. Your chances of dying on the way to the hospital don't change because you have great insurance. A hospital closure is going to affect you no matter how good your insurance is. If your life is on the line, you want the hospital that you can get to the fastest to be fast. You don't want it to be an hour's drive away. But that's what's going to be happening, especially and sadly in, like these MAGA areas. So, yes, even if you have fantastic insurance and you're not afraid of losing it and you don't care how much the price goes up, you're still going to be affected. But you say, okay, I live in a rural area or an urban area, and my hospital isn't going to be affected. Guess again, because all those people that don't have insurance and need emergency care that can't be turned away, guess where they're going to go? Guess who's going to be filling up the emergency room there? And so the emergency rooms are going to be overcrowded. You think the waiting lists are going to get shorter as hospitals shut down? I don't think so. I think the waiting lists are going to get longer. And the waiting list gets longer no matter how much money you make. So this notion, this ridiculous notion that somehow things aren't going to affect you because you have magical white powers or, whatever. No, I'm sorry to be the one to inform you that right now you're going to be impacted. I don't care who you are, every single American. I'm not talking about undocumented people here. Every single American. I'm not even talking about immigrants, legal or otherwise. I'm talking about born and raised. I have ancestors on both sides of my family that literally go back to, like the first two communities that were made in America, the USA, before there was the USA. Jamestown and forget the other one. But My ancestors go way back. And yeah, some of them used to own people, and I'm not proud of that, but there's nothing I can do about that. But that's my point. It doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter how much money you make, doesn't matter how American you are, and it doesn't matter who you voted for. If the Republicans get their way, you're screwed. Now you'll say, "Oh, well, why can't they, they don't do the Republicans are doing this whining thing where they will, they don't the changes won't go into effect until December 31st." As though one, we should ever agree that the Republicans are ever going to do anything in good faith. They can't even agree that Epstein's list and the people that paid Epstein for the privilege of raping children should be prosecuted. They can't even agree on that. They'll be like, what about Clinton? I'm like, okay, why is Donald Trump protecting Bill Clinton then? I don't care who's being protected. Everyone on the list should be prosecuted. But Republicans are the ones that are sitting there trying to cover up for people. You can talk about all the Bill Clinton stuff you want, but Democrats aren't trying to cover up for him. Republicans are. Right? Every single Democrat voted to release the Epstein files, and they now have another person, and they can just tip that scale. And Mike the Coward Lying Johnson won't even let Congress come together because he knows what's going to happen. All right. So I got distracted again. That's the kind of good faith that the Republicans negotiate with. So, one, this is the only leverage the Democrats have. They can talk about, oh, well, what's going to happen? Why can't you just do this clean spending bill and then talk about it? Because then we don't have any leverage. That's why. And that's why budgets matter. And that's why these things matter, is because that's the only way a minority party has any leverage over anything. It's the only way to get concessions. And yes, the Republicans won, but yes, half of America voted for Democrats. We did, when it's, like the Republicans in charge, then it's like what the Democrats want doesn't matter. The Republicans won't even talk to the Democrats. But when the ACA was passed, they just lost all of their poop, even though that bill had more votes for amendments than any bill in American history. And almost all of them were brought up by the Republicans, including the ones they criticized, like the so-called, death panels. Did you know that? The death panels were an amendment proposed by the Republicans, then blamed on the Democrats. But this is the good faith that we're dealing with. So, yes, the Democrats need the leverage. So that's one reason. That's the political reason. There's also a very practical reason. And that's, insurance companies do not just ask AI what their insurance rate should be and then wait 2 minutes for a response from Grok. They actually have to do research and study and figure out what the insurance rates are going to be before they offer them. And in order to know what they're going to be, they need to know if the ACA is going to exist or not, if it's going to be funded or not. So that makes a big difference. And they need this time between now and then to figure out the insurance rates. So the Republican rebuttal that, oh, well, we have until December 31st is disingenuous on both of those counts. And I would add on the third count that I have zero confidence that there would ever be a vote raised on funding the ACA. Mike Johnson would never bring it to the floor, and neither would Thune. Both of them will just pretend this whole thing never happened, and the Democrats won't be able to do anything about it. And a lot of us have rightfully complained that the Democrats have not done enough. They haven't done everything they can do. Well, now they are. They're standing up and they're showing some courage right now. And like it or lump it, that's the reality. At least they're fighting in the only way they can. And they're not fighting for themselves. They're not grandstanding like the Republicans are. I see Mike Johnson on every single bleepity bleep. And all he does is lie about, oh, the undocumented, oh, they're fighting for undocumented, Mike. Show me where, Mike. Moses didn't lie, Mike. Why are you lying? Democrats need to drop the mic. Boom. There's a pun for you. So then there's those things, right? If you have insurance, you might lose it. It might double. If you have employment insurance, you're just going to lose your pay raises and your bonuses and possibly your insurance. If you don't care about any of that, you might lose your hospital. And if you lose your hospital, you might lose your life or your spouse's life or your parents' life or your children's life. That's not hyperbolic to say that. People will die if you defund the ACA. People will die because they defunded the ACA if they defund the ACA. That's not at all an exaggeration. A lot of people will die. I wish the networks would talk about that instead of all of this. Oh, whose fault is it? I don't care about blaming it. Like, one thing I've been thinking, like, if I could tell Cory Booker something right now, or Hakeem Jeffries something right now, I would tell them. If I could talk to Chuck Schumer, I would just say, resign, dude. But that's another story. So if I were to talk to Cory Booker or Hakeem Jeffries, I would say, go ahead and call them out on it. Just call their bluff. Just say, okay, we will drop we will say that federal money can't go to paying for insurance for undocumented workers anymore if you agree that we will continue to fund American citizens. And see how they handle that. Because that's exactly what the situation is right now. That would be the status quo. The Democrats would get exactly what they're fighting for. And so then the Republicans would either A, have to say yes, or B, admit that that's not what they actually want. They aren't fighting to keep undocumented workers from getting free health insurance. They're fighting to keep American citizens from getting any health insurance at all. And I wish that people that have Mike Johnson sitting there just lying to their face across the desk from them say, that's a lie. Not just say, well, the Democrats say that's not what's happening. Because then it's a he said, they said. But it's not the Democrats are saying it versus Mike Johnson is saying it. There is a subjective or an objective reality. The Democrats are not asking for undocumented workers to get free health insurance. And Mike Johnson is lying about it because he really just doesn't care if American citizens don't get health insurance. And that will cost everybody in America, except for, the members of Congress, probably. So anyway, I think that's enough for today. It's going to be a short story, or short story. Oh wait, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. Sorry, I do have another rant to rant. And this one is about the whole farmer thing and in a broader context. And some of this rant is against some of you. No offense. But I see a lot of liberals kind of celebrating the loss of MAGA farms. And this is another one of this is kind of like the reverse of what I was just talking about. Okay. Yes, MAGA farmers voted for Trump. Yes, MAGA farmers were stupid to vote for Trump. And yes, MAGA farmers are going to lose their farms because they voted for Trump. They literally bet the farm and lost. And while I can see why there could be some Schadenfreude in all that, excuse me. While I can see there's some Schadenfreude, sorry. Gas happens when you're on live. While I can see there's some Schadenfreude and all that, it's just the same as what I was talking about with the insurance rates. It doesn't just affect the people that are directly affected. There are a couple of dynamics at work here. Number one, there's the tariffs, and most of the talk has been around the tariffs. And there's this, reimbursement or whatever that Trump keeps talking about. They're paid out of the tariffs, which is a ridiculous thing. Like, they need to stop talking about tariffs like they brought in money. No, what they did is they just took money from poor people. But the farms, there are only giving certain types of farms this funding, like soybean farms and, wheat farms and stuff like that. And most of these farms are massive corporate-owned farms. Your smaller farms, and smaller farms is defined by like 500 acres or less. Smaller farms are not getting that money because either they're not growing the right types of crops or because they're growing more than one type of crop. And so, and I think these, make up about 90% of the farms in America. So what's going to happen is these farms are A, affected by the tariffs, and B, the crackdown on immigration is going to affect them more. And the reason for that is that there are a series of costs to legally bringing a migrant worker over. And that includes things like, one, you have to first advertise in the area for 30 days. Then you have to go and fill out all this paperwork. And that's only like $100. But whether you're bringing over one worker or 50 workers or 500 workers, it's the same amount of money. Then you're restricted to certain countries that you can recruit from, but you also have to pay the transportation costs. So because you have to pay the transportation costs, like 90% of the workers that come over on these H-1A visas or H-2A visas, I'm sorry, are from Mexico, and especially like from northern Mexico, because it's just cheaper to to bring somebody over from northern Mexico than like Uruguay or something, or Uganda. They actually bring it's this Mexico's the biggest. Do you know what the second biggest is? This is going to be a surprise. That's South Africa. But those are white people, and they're brought over to be like the in charge, not to do actual like manual labor. But anyway, um the the cost of that, and then you also have to pay, so you pay for the fee. Then a big huge cost is you have to pay for the lodging. And if you are a big corporate farm, you can just build a barracks and have everybody stay there, and it's like a one-time cost, and it's not an annual cost. But if you're a small farmer, you don't have the land to put that on, you don't have the money to build this massive barracks, and so it costs you like have to pay for their rent or their hotel room or whatever for 4 months. And so by the time, and then it's also, you do have to pay them a higher wage. And this is why I think we need immigration reform, is because a lot of people will say, oh, well, you just want to get by with slave labor. No, actually, that's why we need immigration reform, is so that people can't get away with slave labor. But if the only cost is they have to, I think they, and it's not as drastic as you might think, to bring over an undocumented or a migrant legally, you pay the going rate for whatever that particular um, role is, and the going rate is established by statute or whatever. And so you have to pay that much money to them. Um, but it's only like about $3 an hour more than what the undocumented workers get. So I think there's this kind of like, there, like people call them slave wages or whatever. They're not that bad. They work their asses absolutely off, and they make less money than they should. But that's why we need laws that say, correct this imbalance, rather than make it impossible for small farmers to subsist. So what do I mean by that? All right. First of all, Americans don't want these jobs. And that's why you have to run the ads for 30 days, establishing that there is no work there. There's no Americans wanting that work, or, like legal immigrants that want that work. That doesn't happen. Like, if you want to move to California and pick strawberries, go right ahead. But I do not see lines of white people lining up and asking for that job. I just see a bunch of white people on Twitter complaining about how immigrants are taking our jobs away. Well, you know what? If you want that job, you are absolutely priority number one, and they have to look at your application before they hire any immigrants. So there's that. But the average cost per worker, and this is per season, by the way, is $7,000 more for someone that is brought over legally than an undocumented worker. Cost the farmer $7,000 more per worker. The average small farmer makes a profit of about 50 grand a year. Okay. And has, on average, about 30 workers. And say 50% of those are undocumented. So that means 7 times 15,000 is $105,000 a year or a season. Usually, especially like in California, you can have 2 growing seasons. So that means that they would have to lose $100,000 a year to continue to do business, which is not a very, viable uh platform, right? Like, do you go into business to lose $100,000 a year to make $100,000 a year? So all those farms are going to go under. They're going to go belly up. And these subsidized corporate farms are going to buy them up. So all those small farms are going to become parts of big farms. And when all those small farms become parts of big farms, that means we become even more corporate owned as a nation than we are right now. It also means that the price of your food is going to skyrocket. We have not paid enough attention to this, but the mass deportations are going to have a much greater impact on inflation than the tariffs are. And when you combine it with the tariffs, it's going to be just downright caustic. I've been warning on this program that we are in for some stagflation, and we've already started entering that. But it's going to get a lot worse. It's going to get a lot worse. And mark my words, the economy is going to be the worst it's been since the Great Depression before this administration is done. Random white guy agrees with me. Hey, random white guy. Thanks for watching. He's a great follow on Twitter. So if you, or on X. So thanks for weighing in. But yeah, and all right. So the insurance, so the farms are going to go under, and it might be easy to celebrate the Schadenfreude and like, you stupid MAGA farmer, but you're going to still end up paying more for strawberries. Your Schadenfreude costs money. Just want you to know that your Schadenfreude might cost you your job. So liberals should not be any more happy about MAGAs losing their farms than MAGAs should be about Democrats losing their health insurance. I think it's time, as Americans, we all just cheered for America. What is best for America? And what's best for America is small privately owned farms remain small privately owned farms. And what's best for America is that Americans have health insurance. I don't see how anybody would have any disagreement with either of those statements. So can we just stop wanting the other people to suffer and start wanting all of us to do better? And so I'm sorry, I get accused of being biased and whatnot, so I'm rebuking the liberals this morning. Stop celebrating MAGA farms going under. It's not cool, it's not funny, and it's not helpful. So all right, now we're hitting an hour. I sucked it up and I did my podcast today, which I didn't think I was going to do. I was really ready to not do it. So anyway, anybody that stuck around and watched, I appreciate you for doing so. Nice to talk to you, RWG. And I will see you guys on the social media universe.